Hi, my name is Jonas and I'm bringing you another Unreal Engine tutorial, and this time we are going to talk about surroundings awareness and how to implement stuff like movement limits and camera limits. So let's just jump right into it. In our project here we have a setup with a block here. And the idea is that we want to know if we are facing this wall or some wall, any wall actually. And then we are going to want to do something with the movement. So we want him to restrict his movement to keep him facing the wall. And we also want to make sure that he cannot turn away from the wall when he's in first person. So that stuff we want to cover this in this video. Also, I want to spend a little time looking into how we can, what do you call that, clean up blueprints so it's easier to maintain. But I'm gonna melt this in between the stuff. So all we are going to talk about in here is going to be the base character. So if you call your stuff something else, it's not going to be called base character, but it's basically your character blueprint. Okay, so what we want to do is that when we come close to a wall, we want to press a button and check if we are close to a wall. So you can decide to do this otherwise, but just for this tutorial I'm gonna implement key press. So when I press U, because I'm left-handed, I want to do something with this. So what I want to do in order to get some awareness of my surroundings is to make a line trace towards forward, facing the direction of my player. So in order to keep this neat and clean, I'm going to make a new function for this, and we're going to call this facing wall, something like this. Okay, before we start to fill in this, let's also notice that we have a direction scene component up here that I'm going to be using, and if you take a look at the viewport, you can see this is actually just a scene component like this I dropped in, and the neat thing about this is that it has a direction. So X is a forward direction. You can see the red is the X. So I'm going to refer to this as the direction. So I'm just going to delete this and use this one. It's the same. Okay, so let's continue with the facing wall. So the thing we want to do is we want to make a line trace. So right click and make a line trace by channel, and we want this to begin at our this direction world location, this one, and the end point is going to be the forward vector for this one. Right, and then we want to add to this some distance that we want to check, and for now we're just going to enter 100 centimeters. And we want to add this one plus vector and add these two together to get the end point. So this is basically checking 100 centimeters in front of us to see if we are hitting something. Okay, let's turn on draw debug type for duration, so that we know if we can see if we hit something. Okay, so if we are facing something, then let's make a variable for this to hold this value, and we are going to call this variable something like facing wall, maybe facing. Let's call this. Let's call it hugging wall. Sounds good. Okay. So if we hit something, we're going to connect this one, and so this is going to be true if we hit something, and that's actually what we're going to do for now. I think we're going to return to this one because later on we will need some more, but for now this is actually telling us if we are facing a wall. So let's go out here and say once we press a U, we want to, oops, not this one, the function facing a wall. So when we press this one, we will check if we are facing a wall. Right, so we can actually quickly test this and see if we get a line trace, and this may be a little bit difficult to see. Actually, I don't see anything. Did I miss something? Did I forget something? Forward vector. Okay, let's make a breakpoint here, pressing F9 and then press U. So okay, so we get the trace, and we have draw debug for duration, and we start at the direction here, and we add. Oh, this is actually a plus, I see. Okay, that doesn't work. We need to multiply this. Right, and let's add 100 to this. Okay, so let's try this again. Okay, so we get the trace now. So if I hit this the button really fast, we can see that we are drawing a line trace 100 units in front of us. So if we can come close to the wall, we can also see that we are hitting the wall. So that's the marks we see on the wall here. Okay, so now that we have that information, we can start to use this. Okay, one thing that we might want to do first is to restrict the movement. So and actually one thing also we want to do is to make sure that our player is rotated towards the wall. So in order to do this, we want to make a function for this also, and new function, let's call this rotate to wall, this one. Okay, and let's call it. Okay, like this. And this function needs to know which way we want to turn the character to. So inside our facing a wall, we can get this direction by looking at what we hit. So let's break this one. Okay, so in here we have an impact normal, and this impact normal we want to return from our function. So let's move over here facing a wall, and inside the outputs add this wall normal, and this is the vector. Right, so I think it created a node for me actually. Here it is. Alright. So okay, so this wall normal is gonna be the impact normal. And good thing, maybe I don't know if we're gonna use this, but we could also return the information whether or not we hit a wall. So we have that information available. So let's call this facing wall. And this is going to be the boolean hugging wall, right? So compile, save. And out here now we have the wall normal. So inside our rotate character to wall, let's take this information in and see if we can use that to rotate the character. So this one is going to, we want to know the forward. This is actually just a wall normal, but for clarity, let's call this the wall. No, sorry, the forward vector, and it's of course going to be a vector, so we can connect this one in here. Alright, so let's go inside here and implement the logic for this. So the entity that we want to rotate is actually the capsule, because that's going to rotate everything. So we drag the capsule component out here, and here we can set world rotation, and it takes a rotation. So what we have here is actually only a forward vector, but if I understand this correctly, then this direction here, there's a scene component. This has the red vector, or the direction pointing forward. So this is the x-axis. So I believe we can use this to say make rotator from x. So this says it builds a rotator giving only the x-axis. So the x-axis we're giving it is the forward vector. So this is going to make a rotator pointing forward. So we can use this to just put into this one. So let's test this out really quick. So if we come towards the wall and just point like this and press U, you see he turns the opposite way of the wall. So we actually need to do a little bit with this rotation. So let's Alt and click to break this one, and right click to split it, and then we are going to add 180 degrees to turn him around. So plus float, and then make vector. Sorry, rotator. Like this. Okay. And make sure roll goes in here, pitch go in here, and the yaw, like we added something to, goes in here. Connect this one. Alright. So that should be it. So let's try this out again. So we come over to a wall. Let's try angling a little bit and press U. And now he's facing the wall. But as soon as we move, he's gonna turn again. So we will have to press U all the time in order to keep. And that's not really what we want. So let's take a look at this now. Okay. Let me see. We can take a look at the movement input here, and this is where I will simplify this, because often I see tutorials modifying this movement section here, and it ends up being a total mess of arrows going back and forth. So I want to start out by cleaning this up a little bit. So let's take this stuff here and mark it up. So I'm shift holding and marking up this stuff here. So this is, I'm going to Control C to copy this, and I'm going to make a function for this. I'm going to call this handle forward direction. And for now, I'm just going to paste this in. Okay, so it's taking the scale value, so we also need to feed this into this function. So it's the axis value actually we need. So let's add that to the function here as an input, float. It's called the axis, and it's float, and it goes into this one. So now we have recreated this the same functionality we have out here. So we can disconnect this. So disconnect, okay, and connect this up, and connect this up. Okay, so let's take the other part here, and we want to do the same down here, and this we can make this a little bit easier by right-clicking, marking up stuff, and collapse to a function like this. And that's going to create the function. It's going to remove everything, so that's why I didn't do it with the first one. So let's name this one something similar, handle right direction. Okay, let's open this one up and see if we have everything set up correctly. Okay, looks like it's fine. Maybe you want to straighten out a little bit of this. Okay, so the reason why I talked about this is because we need to do something about the movement, because we wanted to limit the movement when he's facing the wall. Okay, so we have this information now, hugging a wall set, and well, we can just pull out this information inside the function, but when I look at the event graph, I kind of like to be able to see that this function is using some global, these are global variables. So I kind of, this is not necessary, but it creates it kind of documents itself by doing this. So it tells us that we are using this inside. So I want to get this in here, and I want to feed this into this function here. So this is basically the same hugging wall, and I think we need this. So if we are hugging a wall and looking at the forward direction, so what do we want to do? So if we are facing the wall, we don't want it to be able to move back and forth, for example. So let's implement that. Okay, so let's make a little bit of space and say, okay, drag this one up and make a branch like this. Connect this and connect this. So if we are hugging a wall, I actually think I'm gonna make this the negative. So I'm gonna not this one. It's easier for me to work with, but you can do it as in any way you want. So if we are not hugging a wall, then we are just moving normally. So if we are hugging a wall, then this one will be hit, and then we don't want to add anything to the movement input. So actually you can test this out really quick. We press U now, and I press forward and backwards. You can't see it, but nothing happens. So now I can only move from side to side. And now the rotation is kind of broke also, but that's another story. We will fix that in a moment. Okay, so let's implement the other one also. So hugging a wall, get, and we want to put this into the handle right direction. So add a new input here also, hugging wall, and feed this into this one. You could obviously drag from the same one, but I just like it neater this way. Okay, so what we want to do when we with the right movement is a little bit different. But the first thing is kind of the same. Let's actually make a little extra cleanup. Usually I also see a lot of these long lines, and this is not kind of, it is kind of a very short line compared to what I see sometimes. But a little trick to get rid of all these lines is to make use of the local variable. So you can drag this one out and say promote to local variable, and then let's name this one local scale value. So to begin with, when we enter this function, we will set a local variable. So this is accessible inside this function only. And then we also want to make a branch, as we did with the forward, like this, and connect it up, connect this one up. And similar to the other one, I'm gonna make this the opposite, because it's easier for me to get my head around. So let's say, okay, if we're not hugging a wall, then we just have the complete normal movement pattern as we had before. So since the true part is at the top, I think I'm gonna move this part up here. Okay, so if we are hugging a wall, then we want to do something else. So what we want to do here is get the actor rotation for our character or player. Get actor rotation, and we want to get the right vector, so we only get the right movement. Oh, sorry. This one. And this is instead going to be our world direction. We can't drag this one into it because it can't have two. So we need to make a new one. Control C, Control V, and plug this into the world direction. And here comes the part where it makes good sense, because now we can actually unplug this one, and we can make use of our little local value here, and we can also drag this one in here. And we avoid having these lines going all over the screen. So when you read this code, I think personally it makes it easier to look at. So anyway, we don't really need this one for anything. So let's compile and save, see if this works. So we have now, we press U and something funny is going on. Okay, I messed up something. Okay, let's see. We have the get right vector, get right vector. Okay. What did we miss? So let's see, did I miss something out here? More right. Okay, he wasn't supposed to be turning like that. Let's see. All right, one thing actually we are missing. Okay, so if we go back to the function that we made called facing a wall, then on the character movement component, there's something called orient rotation to movement. That's what makes him rotate like this. So when I press right, he moves right, and he rotates, makes this rotation. So we actually want to turn this off if we are hugging a wall. So we can do this by just dragging this one out and say, no, not this one. Take the character movement, and from this one drag out and set orient rotation movement. Connect this one up and this one. And then the value of this is going to be the opposite of if we are hugging the wall. So if we're hugging the wall, we don't want to orient rotation to movement. So this is going to be not. And connect this one up. Okay, this is getting a bit messy. Okay. So let me add a reroute node to make this easier to look, better to look at, and maybe also to this one. So mark these two up. Move down a little bit. Okay. And can maybe move this over a little bit. Something like this. This is pretty neat, I think. Okay, so let's see if this works. We are pressing U, and now that we are holding left and right, we can move. But once we move outside, we are still, now the rotation is screwed up, so we can't really turn and do anything right now. So what we need to do is to implement something on the event tick, and usually we don't want to do some heavy calculations on tick, but in this case we actually need to make a line trace. We need to make the same line trace as we did before. So we need to call this rotate, no, sorry, facing a wall. Let me just check something. Okay, yes. So facing a wall, we need to check if we are constantly facing a wall. So this is event check, and you can see also I have this sequence. It makes it easier to see that I need to do a lot of stuff instead of having them in one long line. Obviously, if I get too many of these, I might decide to just chain them like this. So for now, let's actually just do this. Okay, so let's see. One thing, as I mentioned, we don't want to make a line trace, because if I play this, now we are going to see a line trace constantly when we walk around. And that's going to be, it's looking pretty cool, but it's going to be expensive in terms of all these line traces. So we want to only do this if we are hugging a wall, to check if we are still hugging the wall. So let's feed this into the facing wall by adding an input here. Should let's call this should trace check. Should check. Yeah, something like this. Okay. So if we are hugging a wall, then we should check. Okay. So this is the logic behind this. Okay, so what we're going to do in here is start out by moving this down a little bit, and we're going to make a branch, and we are going to say if I should check is true, then it will do this check. And while we're inside this one, let's also make another little bit of house cleaning. So this part here, we can collapse to a macro by right-clicking and say collapse to macro, and that's going to make it even more clean. So let's make this name, let's call it check facing wall. And since I like to have, we have this offset that we set to 100. Let's make this something we can see from the function, so it's not buried inside this macro. So just like we have for functions, we can add something. We can add parameters to this. So let's call this forward distance, and this basically just makes it easier to configure and tweak later on. So facing a wall now has a parameter called facing distance, and we can set that to 100. And the neat thing about this is that once you enter this function, you immediately can see that we have a parameter here that we can tweak on. So it's easy to get an overview over this function. Okay, anyway, so now whether we're walking around, we don't have the trace running all the time, but if I press U, something is not working. That's great. What did I miss now? It should be hugging wall. So if we are hugging a wall, then we should keep checking. So once we come in here, we say should check. This is going to be true, and if it keeps hitting a wall, oh, by the way, let's make these, and this doesn't have anything to do with it, but it just makes these bad names. Okay, so the direction is still this one. Okay, and our input distance is this one, the forward direction. Facing wall. So we are checking 100, and it's going to start to end. Should actually work. but it's not. Well, it's orienting, but it's not keeping the facing. Oh, what did I miss? What did I miss? Hugging a wall. And this one. Huh. That's odd. Actually, I can't really see what I missed. Okay, so let's debug this. Let's try and debug this. Okay, so let's put in a print statement, and we can demonstrate this also. So we drag this one in, and it's going to throw in a cast for us, our conversion. So now we are not facing a wall. Keep saying false. And that's weird, actually. Oh, I think I know what's wrong. Okay. When we added this should check and we press U, we forgot to say that we should check. Obviously we want to check if we press U. So that was the bug. So now it keeps saying false, and I press U, and now it's tracing. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so once we leave the box, we keep facing. We lose the locking of movement, and now we can move freely again. Okay, so this is what I will talk about concerning movement restriction. So the other thing I want to talk about also is if we come into first person, I have this, I will turn the character, as you can see, the way I'm facing. If we are in here, I want to keep, no matter what, I want to keep the orientation in here. So let's make this and see what problems also arises in here. So one moment. Let's see, we have the camera zoom to begin with. Yeah. Input axis zoom. If you have followed my other tutorials, you will maybe have this one, but let's see, inside this one I control the camera zoom, and I have two cameras here. I have one called follow cam and one called first person cam, and I'm just gonna leave this on the screen so you can see if you haven't made this one. So not gonna go through all of this. I have covered this in another tutorial. But just gonna scroll over this so you can have a chance to catch up if you need to make this. Okay. Okay. So inside here, the top part here is when we are in first person. So we want to make a new section in here. So what we want to do is to set the controller rotation yaw to false if we are in first person. So we can do this by writing use controller yaw to false. So that's the first thing that we want to do. Okay, so let's test this out really quick so we can see what that does. Okay, so now that we are in first person, as you can see, I turn my head around, the camera around rather, but the character doesn't rotate with me. So now he stays connected but this also creates this problem that we can actually turn our head all the way around. So now we want to restrict the camera movement to be from here to about here, something like that. So let's do this next. Okay, so again we need a little function to set this, and we're gonna call this set concave player, something like nope, not a variable. Get away. Function. Where is it? Function here. Okay, we will call this set player. No, player camera yaw limits. Okay, and this one is going to take a minimum and a maximum angle, or rather degree, but it's going to be a float, 2 floats. So we're going to need 2 floats. One is going to be called minimum, and the other one is going to be called maximum. Okay, and what we will use is the player camera manager, and in order to get this one we need the player controller, and we can get it in different number of ways, but I like to get it by getting get controller, not that one, sorry, get pawn controller, this one, and then I'm gonna cast this to a player controller. So this is one of the few places where I want to cast, because this is one of the kind of global generic ones that we have. Anyway, from this one we can drag out and type player camera manager, this one, and let's move it over a little bit, and then we can from this one drag out and set view your minimum, and like down here your max. Okay, so we want to set these two. So we want to set this one and this one, and this is one is gonna look messy anyway. So and this is one of the few that I don't care about making look good, because it's just gonna, yeah. If you want to, you can fix this up to make it nicer, but this is just a utility thingy, and I'm not gonna do anything about it. So anyway, let's continue to return to the adjust camera zoom, and here we want to call it and set some minimum and maximum. So what we need is actually our direction again and our current rotation. So we will get rotation from this one, and we want to be able to rotate plus minus a certain number of degrees. So since this tutorial is getting a little bit long, I will skip a few things now, and I'm just gonna say we want a plus. No, I'm not. Usually I would make this some kind of parameter, but you can do that yourself. So I'm gonna minus float and plus float, and I'm gonna enter 70 degrees. You can enter whatever you want, but I'm gonna be using this one, and then I'm gonna use our function that we just made. Drag this one in, connect it up, and plug in the minimum and the maximum, and I'm gonna also plug this one in. Okay, so let's see how this looks. So if we come in here, you can see we can still turn the camera freely around. So if we come into first person now I can't move any further than this. I can move up, look up and down, but I can't really. So this is actually something that we could use if we were kind of climbing on the wall. Let's assume we were climbing. We're missing an animation, so it would look pretty cool, I think. So once we come out here, we can then freely turn again. But now our camera is stuck in this 70 degrees. So we also need to set this on a different place. So I press Control W, and on the third person branch down here, I want to set this to minus 180 to 180, and I'm just going to show that what this does. And by the way, we want to add another check, because if we are not hugging a wall, no, let's talk about this afterwards. Okay. Now I set this to minus 180 and 180. If I play this and I try to turn the camera, I can't, and that's something that to me seemed pretty weird. So the way out of this was I found to type 100 minus 179.9, something like this, and now I can move freely again. So if we come into the wall, hug it, and we are restricted, and I zoom out, we are not restricted anymore. And if we come free of the wall, we are also able to move the camera again. All right. So, why did I want to? Actually, yeah. Okay. So let's. Now we are facing the wall, and we are fixed towards the wall. And if I zoom out now into third person, okay, nothing. It works. Okay. Alright, I think actually it does work. I'm sorry, I'm a bit surprised. I was trying this out earlier on, and I thought I had to use another check, but apparently I don't. So, alright. Oh, it does seem to work. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so actually I think this concludes this rather long tutorial. And just to sum up, we've covered a little bit of how you can make your character aware of his surroundings by pressing a key right now to make a line trace. Later on I may add something about how we can add different traces. For example, if you want to know if there's an obstacle in front of you that you can jump over, then you could maybe make two trace lines, one above your hips and one maybe somewhere lower around your hip, or maybe at your knees. And if one hits and the other one doesn't, then you know you can jump over something and do stuff. Also, I think it's, since we also now made this functionality, I think it's kind of the most logical next step would be to implement something that would make us able to jump up on this box ledge, and then climb from side to side on this. So I think I may cover this in the next tutorial. Who knows? But this, yeah, and we also talked about how you can now limit your movement to only move in one direction according to a trace normal, and also how we can limit the camera rotation. Whoa. Right, so that's it for now. I hope you liked it, and there was some parts that you could use for something. Okay, bye, and see you in the next video.